Earlier this week, we learned of the extraordinary story of United States Coast Guardsman Zach Lash. Aviation Survival Technician Second Class Lash is a genuine American hero. His incredible rescue efforts in the immediate hours following Hurricane Ian's destruction in South Florida would make any American proud. This man was lowered down from a helicopter. Picture this now. Lowered down over the raging, flooded waters of Southwest Florida, and Lash eventually kicked through a wall of a house, not a door, a wall, to find a husband and a wife who had been stranded there. The woman was disabled and uses a specialized wheelchair, really big, mechanical wheelchair there. The coastie not only rescued the couple, but then he went back down for the chair, attached it to his body as his crew reeled him back up. This is remarkable and heroic, and every American should commend him. Lash is the absolute best example of the heroism and understated dignity that so many members of the American military exemplify. I bet you if you actually saw Zach Lash and you thanked him for his service, thanked him for his heroism, he'd say, aw shucks, just doing my job, just following my training. Plenty of other guys out there doing the same thing I'm doing. That kind of thing. You know who I'm talking about. Now, for his efforts, Lash received a personal congratulatory phone call from the Commander-in-Chief, Joe Biden, as well he should. Biden bragged about this phone call, by the way, in remarks to the media this weekend. Yeah, he was talking about the fact that he spoke with Aviation Survival Second Class Technician, Second Class Zach Lash. He explained to the media, he said, he described how difficult the decision is for people to leave everything and come to safety. I told him how proud of him I was, and I thanked him for all his work that he and his coasties are doing to save lives. Listen, I don't hold it against Biden. Good. I'm glad he called him, and I'm glad, when you're commander-in-chief, you're allowed to share stories like that with the media. While he was on the phone with Zach Lash, Joe Biden, when he was expressing his gratitude and his pride, he also could have just told him to go down the hall, clean out his locker, turn in his uniform, and get the heck out, because Biden has just instituted policies in our military where there's no room for the likes of Zach Lash. That's right, Joe Biden is basically fired. He's discharged Zach Lash. Mr. Lash is unfit to serve in Joe Biden's Coast Guard or any other part of the U.S. military because he refused to take the COVID-19 vaccine. This is despite the fact that Lash and the other nearly 3,000 coasties like him are in peak physical condition, and they face virtually no danger at all should they be infected with the virus. Not to mention the fact that we know now the vaccine doesn't actually prevent infection in the first place. We know that because Joe Biden, who is double vaxxed and double boosted and wears double masks even when he's wandering around aimlessly outside with no one around him, he got infected with COVID. But Biden has determined that Mr. Lash, because he won't get the vaccine, he has to go. Now, as infuriating as this absolutely indefensible policy is, it isn't even the most un-American and unconstitutional aspect of this arbitrary and discriminatory policy. Nope, the more maddening thing here is the fact that Lash is, he actually asked for, requested a religious exemption from the vaccine. Yeah, that's his reason for not getting vaccinated. And then the military denied his request. Let's be perfectly clear about what the military is communicating to this man, to a man like Lash, and to all the other thousands of coasties, airmen, soldiers, sailors, Marines, and guardians who are facing discharge right now by being denied their religious exemption. The military is telling these fine young men and women that they do not respect, believe, or acknowledge the validity of their religious faith. And that's a little bit terrifying. Lash fills out a form, tells his chain of command that his personal religious convictions keep him from getting the vaccine, and his commanding officers say, denied. Your religious conviction is not real, it's not valid. Get bent. Does that sound like America to you? Earlier this week, we had Representative Michael Waltz on this very program. He's a retired Green Beret. He addressed this issue. Here's what he had to say.
These folks.
Congressman, I also understand that Mr. Lash, like so many other people in the military, they put forth a request for a religious exemption. That's the reason why Mr. Lash didn't want to get the vaccine. And the military denied his religious exemption. I don't know about you. I'm very uncomfortable with the military or anyone in the federal government basically saying to an individual citizen, no, we don't find your religious belief valid. That's really what they're saying when they deny a religious exemption, aren't they?
Yeah, this religious exemption process is a sham. And that's not just, me kind of being over the top. I've talked to general officers off the record, people throughout the system. It is a rubber stamp process. Not a single one has been approved.
Yeah.
It just automatically gets it denied from this White House and from this Pentagon. So it's a slap in the face of people's religious convictions. And again, it's going to gut our military at the time we need it the most.
It's a sham. It's a rubber stamp. Every single request for religious exemption has been denied. What's the point of having a religious exemption request if all the requests get denied? Now, members of the federal government are quick to point to a statement by the Vatican on the permissibility of the vaccine for Catholics, despite the fact that aborted fetal cells were used in its testing process. Now, it should be noted a couple of things here. First of all, not every person of faith is under the guidelines of the Vatican. There are a lot of Christians, Lutherans, Presbyterians, Baptists, non-denominational. They really don't care what the Vatican says, frankly. And what about Jewish Americans and Muslim Americans, right? But you ask anyone in the military, or you ask anybody in the government, the Biden administration, hey, the Vatican says it was fine. Well, that very same document from the Vatican that permits the use of the vaccine also emphasizes that it should never be mandatory. And at the same time, practical reasons makes, this is quoting from the document, at the same time, practical reasons makes evident that vaccination is not, as a rule, a moral obligation and that therefore it must be voluntary. That's what their statement said. But it appears those in authority missed that little nugget. It's another aspect of this that's very important. It would be really great if the Biden administration and the Pentagon followed the Vatican's guidance on things like abortion and transgender medical procedures and a whole lot of other things that the Vatican takes pretty seriously. But apparently, the Vatican's rulings only matter to the Biden administration when they can be distorted to force a vaccine on people when they don't want it or need it. But the Vatican pronouncement is being completely misused in this case also. You see, the Catholic Church emphasizes that in certain issues of morality that are not strictly and dogmatically defined, each Christian must follow their own moral conscience. That's right. Catholics aren't little robots that just take marching orders from the Pope all the time. Yes, there are certain things that are dogma. Those are sort of non-negotiables. But things like this, even though the Vatican says the vaccine is permissible, it's still up to each individual to determine whether they, in good conscience, can reconcile the use of aborted babies in any part of the process of the manufacture of these vaccines. The Vatican statement alludes to this directly. It says, those who, however, for reasons of conscience refuse vaccines produced with cell lines from aborted fetuses must do their utmost to avoid by other prophylactic means and appropriate behavior becoming vehicles for the transmission of the infectious agent. In other words, what they're saying is they're taking into account the fact that people will follow their own conscience and not get vaccinated. If you choose to do that, you need to socially distance, you need to wear masks, you shouldn't be coughing in people's faces. That's all they're saying. So why doesn't the Biden administration pay attention to that? Why don't they follow that aspect of the Vatican statement? In other words, this is what the Vatican is saying. If you take the vaccine, you're not sinning, but you're free to choose on your own. If it's morally reprehensible to you as a believing Catholic, there's nothing inconsistent with your decision and the Catholic Church. And that's pretty important. But apparently, see, the Pentagon knows better what makes a person a good practicing Catholic or a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim. And see, that's the problem. When the government tells an individual American how they're supposed to properly practice their religious beliefs, well, the First Amendment is rendered meaningless. And now it's affecting our military readiness. People like Zach Lash, men like that, they're sent packing. Well, you got to ask yourself, how many people are going to die when the next hurricane comes along because Zach Lash won't be there, or the other 3,000 Coasties won't be there to save them? See, this is what happens when the government gets into the business of religion. Last I checked, we actually fought a revolution a little while back to make sure that the government can't tell us how to practice our faith.